As both the chairperson for this track and the moderator for our next discussion, I'm going to introduce myself. Once again, I am Denise Barfus, and I am pleased to be able to be here with you as we talk about experience. Our next panel, again, happens to be mine, so I'm incredibly excited to bring up and to introduce Christian Kesper and Amber Lundy. I'm going to introduce them in more detail, but if you'll come join me, we're going to be talking about the cockpit experience and revolutionizing it with AI. So, as we think about AI, I want to explain why our panelists are so incredibly well qualified to be here today and how they're going to share with us their learnings and insights. First, we have Amber Lundy. She's the Product Design Director on Advanced Technology and Driver Assistance Systems for the EV at Ford Motor Company. Thanks, Amber, for being here. She is a visionary creative strategist and technologist known as an inspirational speaker. We're excited to hear it. Stealth surgeon. This is going to get more and more interesting. And mad scientist. Amber seamlessly translates complexity across organizations, driving innovation and bold ideas. She has led teachable AI design strategy at Amazon and now brings her expertise to Ford electric vehicles. With a diverse portfolio spanning technologies, timelines, and media, she is sought after for mentorships, methodology, and a glimpse into the future. We get a chance to hear from her today. Welcome, Amber. Next to her is Christian Kesper. He is the Global Advisory Lead for Automotive at Endava. I had that right the first time. Christian is a strategic leader at the forefront of automotive transformation at Global Advisory Lead Automotive at Endava. He helps clients navigate complex challenges from monetizing legacy systems, something all OEMs need, I happen to know, to deploying AI, connected vehicle services, and digital commerce. With over 13 years of experience, including roles at Porsche, Capgemini, and Volkswagen Group, he brings deep expertise across software-defined vehicles, mobility solutions, and in-vehicle experiences. Passionate about driving measurable impact in a rapidly evolving industry, he simplifies complexity to create forward-thinking solutions. Let's welcome Christian Kesper.
Thank you.
So as we think about AI and the evolution of the traditional cockpit infotainment experience, AI isn't just changing it or evolving it. It is literally transforming the way in which we interact and experience our vehicle and driving. Enhancing personalization, voice recognition, real-time decision-making, all of this is now possible with AI. And today, we're going to delve in with these experts into an opportunity to hear and understand what the future decisions need to be and where it will take us in the near and midterm future for the cockpit experience, and especially for the interactions with users and passengers. There are challenges and there are new technologies, but there are bold decisions to be made, and we're looking forward to hearing from them. So let me start off with a round table, meaning both of you. How are AI models like LLMs and GPTs, how are they redefining in-car interactions, and what unique advantages are they bringing? Let's start with Amber.
Yeah. In terms of redefining in-car interactions, I think some things people should be looking at are different types of agent systems driven by LLMs. So you have customer-facing agent systems that have a voice interface and natural language understanding. And then you have more silent agents that can happen on the back end that are doing mass automation across collections of features. Those are the two kind of ends of the spectrum that I find really interesting, that I think are changing the cockpit experience pretty drastically. And a lot of that is silent, so your customers don't have to interface with this AI. I think you need to really nail the natural language understanding portion. It gets even better if you can integrate additional sensor context with your interior. So if you go beyond a mic and you can integrate radar, something beyond camera, for example, those additional sensors and context make that silent interaction and the natural language understanding interaction even better, because that context is what LLMs do really well.
Thank you. Christian, can you add to that?
I fully support what you said. The interesting experiences we've seen, and Mercedes-Benz, for example, you know that they have launched ChatGPT in the vehicles, and the first studies which came out of that was very, very interesting. People, probably 80% of the people, what they do with ChatGPT in the vehicle is getting relationship advice. And whilst Amber is getting reset up.
Yeah, we're getting reset so everyone has a chance to hear Amber. I'm sorry, Christian, please go ahead and restart.
Fine. So on that, people are using the LLM, ChatGPT in this case, from Mercedes-Benz, to get relationship advice in the car. And that's one very interesting example. But in addition to that, what you said, the agentic topic is super interesting when you think about online service booking. Most of the OEMs haven't really figured out online service booking yet. 20 years since we could have done it, but we still haven't really been able to. And that is probably one thing where agentic AI can really help. So you have an agent in the vehicle, you have an agent at the dealer management system of the dealership. They interact with each other, they sort it out, because the agent in the vehicle can absolutely know from a diagnostics perspective what's happening with the car, where the fault is, read it out before the vehicle actually gets into the workshop, parts are being booked, everything is ready. So fully support what Amber has said, that spectrum between LMM, but also then agentic AI, will absolutely make a difference going forward.
I think it's going to revolutionize how we expect to, in the same way that smart speakers introduced an entire new way of having conversations at home, right? I think that the audience and the drivers, the customers will immediately be able to adapt because it will be natural for them. But there are challenges to that. So we're talking about LLMs, we're talking about agentic AI. What are some of the hurdles that OEMs and suppliers are going to have to overcome to have that kind of power computing in the vehicle?
Is this mic working now? I think there's some in-between space that OEMs will have to deal with where their display catalog and interactions are still optimized.
If you'll hold the mic up, I think we'll turn off.
Their display catalog and interactions are still optimized for a touch interface as opposed to a natural language understanding interface in the vehicle or some other means of intent-driven interface in the vehicle, gesture, sentiment, for example. So if your HMI is optimized around a touch interface, your customer is not going to be engaging with your natural language understanding interface as naturally or as much as you might want them to. They're not going to get the benefits of that underlying agentic HMI that's surfacing features to them in a natural way, removing barriers to settings that are hard to find. For example, if your customer's like, where the heck do I change this like sound thing? An LLM can get that kind of context and surface that setting to the customer. But yeah, I think I'll...
Great.
Yeah.
Christian, what kind of challenges are we going to face?
I think it's twofold. One is getting AI ready, because as such some of you know that more than not is how can you get from where you are now, not only in the vehicle, but also supporting the vehicle from the back-end perspective, so that you are able to deploy a ChatGPT in the vehicle so that it works properly. Because then, is it actually the case that you have, if you have it via the cloud, then you can aggregate it across all vehicles and make it better over time. But if you have it only in the vehicle, then obviously it's only in the vehicle and you can't aggregate it properly. So that's one challenge which needs to be solved. I hope it's probably the first one, not the second one, because then when you not be able to aggregate it, then there's really no point. And then the second one is that we need to better understand what we are doing in the vehicle. I'm saying the automotive industry. A lot of OEMs still have not really understood what the passengers, the drivers, the people in the vehicle really do want out of connected services. 25%, probably only 25% at the moment really understand what they want with connected services, understand them and value them. The rest of it either don't understand it, don't value it, certainly will not pay for it. A study of Capgemini, for example, from 2023 said 50% of all connected services remain unused. So that is something we have to solve so that we are really able to deploy AI in the vehicle, which then is only then able to revolutionize the in-vehicle experience. What Amber said is totally right. You are able to have prediction in the vehicle, but you need to understand the data first. But for that, you need to be able to use it, and the people need to use it and understand the value of it.
Is it a chicken or the egg? Sorry, go ahead, Amber.
Oh, I was just going to add a little bit more on like the infrastructure and data side of it. I think there's a lot of OEMs that are probably having challenges around data quality and access to data, making sure that the data that you have actually represents the customer's desired intent in the vehicle. If you do gap analysis across different large language models, you might find that your target use case for your customer-facing product has major gaps because those large language models were not built off of data from customers talking to a car. They're built off of data from customers emailing each other, sending text messages. Like it's all this other data, but not the in-vehicle car data. So if you're an OEM and you're not looking at developing your own proprietary data based on what your customers want to say to your car and how they want to interface with this system, then you're not going to be able to differentiate and fine-tune and optimize for your use cases. You're going to have something that kind of doesn't meet customer expectations. So that data quality and making sure you're set for your own fine-tuning for your use cases is really, really important. And then there's like the onboard compute, like embedded compute and cloud infrastructure compute architecture issues. So, yeah.
And then, sorry, if I may, and then I probably try to answer your chicken and egg question. Who is actually in the vehicle? Now there is in-cabin monitoring which you can use to say, is it her, is it him, is it the child, is it the uncle, the aunt, whoever is driving the vehicle, because the person who bought the vehicle is not necessarily the driver and so forth. So that actually also then plays a role into how do you use AI, and maybe you can use AI for predicting that in a much better way. So that's one thing. But can you elaborate on your chicken and egg question so that I can answer it properly?
Absolutely, but I don't want to skip over the fact that Amber's point is critical when we talk about the quality of data as a hurdle and the training of those models and the way in which they're developed to begin with, when the majority of time the driver is alone in the vehicle. And so when you think about conversational input with a sole driver, it really takes a deeper type of research to get to the needs of that driver. So I appreciated that as a significant point. Now to the chicken and the egg. When we think about AI, generative AI, if we think about it that way, are we able to utilize the artificial intelligence, these models, to then help inform? I don't disagree. As I came from an OEM and I was responsible for our connected programs. And understanding customer needs, customer desires, and a deep understanding of customer utilization, I do not dispute Capgemini's findings. But what I can say, though, is that awareness. This is the chicken and the egg. Is the AI the ability? Is that the channel that we can use to help broaden that awareness that drives valuation, that drives a stickier experience? Or maybe it becomes the experience itself that is the value for the subscription. Yeah. Which one?
Would you like, or shall I?
Go ahead, please.
I'll give you an example of, whenever it came out, it was probably before my time, but satellite navigation in the car is absolutely tremendously different to what everybody has seen before it was there. So that people wanted to pay for it, they was absolutely wanting to have it. They were paying lots of money for it. It revolutionized, at least back then, how we were using something in the vehicle to get from A to B. We don't know at the moment if it is AI or if AI is providing us something in the vehicle for which we then want to pay for another $2,000 a year or $100 a month, whatever it might be. But right now, we don't have it yet. Everything which we have in the vehicle right now can be absolutely subsidized with something we have on our phone. We don't actually need it, and allow me to be a little bit provocative with that statement, but we do not actually need something in the vehicle because most of the things we use in the vehicle we have on our phone. Navigation, most importantly, Spotify, those type of things. Now, with artificial intelligence, and a traveling companion might be already the next step, but then I can as well use it on the phone. I do not necessarily have to have it in the vehicle embedded. So we are currently on the fact-finding mission to see what AI can help us with to find the next big thing in the vehicle, I guess.
Well, from a fact-finding perspective, Amber, it sounds like from your history, you've had a lot of exposure into this, and now at an OEM, what are you seeing as it relates to, because I know from the OEM perspective, having just exited a large OEM, I'm still on the we side, we respect the fact that we expect the fact that the vehicle data is far superior from a transportation experience perspective than what the phone can produce. Not to say that, as you mentioned, Christian, it is those services that we're very used to, but if we're able to combine that with the vehicle data, how can AI completely and seamlessly, without complexity, how can it elevate that experience so that we're utilizing the strength of the vehicle data to enhance that in-vehicle experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's pretty critical for folks to look past this kind of obsession with competing with the phone. I think the power that will come from these experiences is when you're connecting reasoning agents and multi-agent systems directly to the vehicle data. And you're able to leverage that information as real-time as possible, something the phone is never going to be able to do for you. I don't want Siri telling me when I need an oil change, right? Also, you should be looking at what's happening in bipedal robotics and intelligent embodiment, because that long-term is what's happening with our vehicles. There's a reason why there are OEMs in China doing bipedal robots and self-driving vehicles. The reference frame for these AI models is very similar, and when you can plug and play the two, it becomes even more of a human experience. So I'm very much looking beyond this, like, we need to replicate the phone functionality in the HMI, to what does my car do for me that my phone just can't do? And then you need to make those experiences desirable and helpful beyond what the phone can do by bringing into account how humans want to develop relationships with reasoning technologies, with slightly more intelligent technologies. I'm not talking about Alexa and Siri, because I worked on them, but they're annoying. And these newer technologies can be much more sophisticated. So you should be thinking about using generative contextual sentiment in your TTS response so you sound more human and you actually want to talk to this system. You need to be thinking about memory strategy and what you want to remember about your customers. How can you personalize with that memory strategy? And then you also want to think about, like, the slow reveal of a human relationship, right? The first time you go meet a person, the first time you get into your car, you don't divulge everything about yourself. And their humor might be offensive depending on if they don't know you. There's nuance about interpersonal communication and relationship building that can be built into these systems if you design them properly and have, like, objectives over time that are tied to the life cycle of a customer getting into the car. So it's totally possible. I'm very hopeful, and I'm asked about the phone issue a lot. I'm not personally focusing on that in my work.
I just have to pause because I don't know that I have ever actually thought of a relationship building experience in my vehicle with the voice assistant. And write that down.
You don't want to think about it right now, right?
But write that down, because that's so going to be critical as we think about how these develop. Christian, what are you thinking when we talk about AI and this developing relationship and the way in which we're thinking way beyond what the smart speakers of today can do and our phones can do even? When we think about that, how do we think about security? So, how do we marry these two ideas? We want more intuition, we want more learning, we want memory. I need this AI assistant, this agentic AI to know me, but I don't want anybody else to know that stuff. How do we maintain the reality of security for the data and privacy when we're embedding these systems? Let's talk about that. You first, Christian.
Consent management is probably the one thing which comes to mind. Allow me to make a very short but quick, brief comparison to Europe, where as of September this year, you are able to consent to any data point the vehicle is generating, and you can say, I don't want that to be shared with the OEM or not. I understand that there are some states in the US, like Massachusetts, where you can do something similar, but then the OEMs just turn off connectivity in those states, so that's another challenge. But back to the outset, consent management is needed for a person in the vehicle to define what is being shared and what is not being shared. So that is, from my point of view, the only possibility you have as an individual. In addition to that, you have to have much more transparency from the OEM to understand how is data being used. If you understand as an individual how your data is being used, then you can, going back to the value topic which we made earlier, because then you understand, okay, is it actually is it actually adding value for me, yes or no? Is it something I have an advantage of as a professional in the vehicle or not? And then is it all secured, and is it being shared because it might be super private? So that's probably those topics which come to mind.
I agree, and actually before Amber, I give you a shot, let me ask a quick follow-up on that. From the European example, how are they controlling for multi-driver? Without annoying the crap out of drivers getting into a car every time and selecting every single data point.
That's the big mystery. I tell you in October.
Fair enough. Amber, what do we think?
That's funny. I like to pay attention to the CEO of Signal and how she's discussing some of the risks of data privacy, customer trust, and I'll set aside the debate right now around multi-agent systems reaching out to the internet and cybersecurity. And I'm going to couch that one. And then talk about customer trust and privacy in the vehicle when you have increasingly sensing devices. I think customers, once they get into your vehicle, if they have a device, and I would ask how many of us right now have a device in our pocket that's listening?
All of it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of open mics in this room right now. Those customers are already likely getting in the car with an open mic in their pocket. I can pretty accurately assume a level of expectation based on how they might have already been interacting with that device. And then I need to be very respectful and careful about providing customers with the features and settings that they want to say, no, you cannot have that type of data from me. No, you cannot make this type of inference about me. No, I don't want you sharing this information that you've captured about me. It needs to stay on edge and go nowhere else. And then I'm comfortable with using your product. So you need to design around how to make sure those people feel comfortable sitting inside this sensing environment. And I think leveraging some of similar marketing techniques as Apple and talking about their edge-based security is always helpful. And then customers, there is, I think, a wave of change coming in terms of just general sentiment around privacy and the lack thereof and people's desires for it. So depending on your customer, they're going to want different flavors of privacy and control over their data. And in some cases, we might have to pay customers for their data. Yep. So you have to design for that. I would design for the most conservative case first and then walk back to the desired state for your potential market.
Let me double click into the idea of edge computing. Let's talk about what role does that play in this evolution in the cockpit? Go ahead, Amber. We'll let you start.
Yeah.
You brought it up.
Yeah, I think it plays a major role when you look at taking these systems and features into production. I don't think there's a good way to put a fully agentic system into the vehicle without having an edge-based orchestrator and a cloud-based orchestrator. You need both, and you need to be able to understand your use cases well enough to say, my edge orchestrator needs to do X, Y, Z, and when it fails, it kicks it to the cloud orchestrator. and then it can accomplish X, Y, Z and bring it back, and then you handle all of your latency. If your edge compute does not have enough memory capacity, TOPS, you're not going to deliver the level of reasoning you need to do mass automation across feature sets in a way that the customer can just set it and forget it and love the experience. So you got to invest in that edge compute and memory.
Edge computing memory. I wish some of my former counterparts were here so I could just repeat that. Christian.
To add on that, as far as I understood from a technology perspective, OEMs do not have enough headroom, as they call it, so there's not much compute power left to provide edge in the vehicle at the moment. Yeah? So I think it's only Tesla or Rivian from a US perspective who are doing that at the moment. I might be wrong, but most of the others are not doing that. So that's already probably one technology challenge which has to be solved before that is being the case. In addition to that, like you said, what are you solving for? Like what is the customer value for an edge case? Yeah? And what do you want to solve for where you need the cloud connection? And that is something nobody, again I'm provocative, nobody has figured out yet because we are all learning. Everybody is learning what ChatGPT can do for you in the vehicle. Everybody is trying that out. In the next 2-3 years, we'll probably learn quite a lot. And then we sit here again in 2026, 2027, and have a little bit more understanding of what we can do with it, and we might have solved for the big next thing.
Well, let's talk about the big next thing. Amber.
I just wanted to add, I think the timeline that you're talking about is super important too, because 6 months ago, the level of reasoning you could get on the edge with a small model or maybe even a distillation version of a big LLM was drastically different than what you can do today. So even within a 6-month span, the capabilities have changed a lot. So if you don't maintain a healthy North Star vision related to this technology, then you kind of always you're going to be chasing a lot. So you need that farther out vision to move it forward, because every 6 months you're like, oh shit, we can do this now.
Well, now that you're at an OEM, how are you managing that? 6 months later, we've got to make something else happen. Let's talk about that in a legacy world.
Yeah, my team, I feel fortunate that my team is split across the time spectrum. So I have people fixing and working on repairing and improving our systems that are out in the system. And I want experts on my team. So we're also responsible for thinking out model year 28, model year 29, model year 30, model year 40, and then getting into concept space. And we have the capabilities to do that. Depending on the design specialist or the technologist and their capacity, they can work on both sides of that spectrum, or they need to bounce back and forth. I think it's okay to be somebody who just thinks concept, but at some point you got to dust off the fairy dust and launch some stuff. So I like to make sure that my folks can bounce between concept time and delivery time.
Brilliant strategy. Let's talk about how AI agents can evolve beyond the basic questions. What's the weather? What song is this? What time's the game? How do we evolve that? So customers 6 months ago who were not using any form of AI, who today think they can't live without Copilot or ChatGPT, what is that going to look like in the near term? Give us our 1-year projection. How can we evolve? And what's it going to be?
I love nerding out on this topic. Okay, I'll go first. I'm super curious about where there's a couple startups that I'm following, and some of them are looking at the basic techniques for human reasoning that are well known in communication theory, and they are seeing what ChatGPT is doing, returning an exact result. There's a reasoning chain happening, observation, thought, answer, action, like that step. There's a lot of different types of human reasoning, and they can be systematized and taught to your large language model, so you don't have to have the answer every time your customer has a question for your system. And that kind of interaction is super interesting to me, and I think super innovative in a space that is just kind of getting started. There was a second part to your question. I think I forgot.
What's it going to look like? So once we move beyond this, what's next in car?
Yeah, I think I'm also looking for like the multi-sensor input, so more multimodal kind of interactions for sure.
Great. Christian?
I think the concept of a companion will emerge more and more. We've seen that now with ChatGPT at Mercedes-Benz, for example, amongst others. You will have somebody in the vehicle you can talk to about anything. And that will only get more, because what are we doing in the vehicle if we are by ourselves? We usually would have a phone call. We do not necessarily have to have a phone call any longer if we don't want to have one. We can talk about the meeting we just had. We could talk about the next holiday with our family we are due to be planning. We can talk about the birthday of our spouse, of our child. All that information, and then by the time the AI has been understanding us for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, they know already what's been happening. So they can predict much better. So it's the combination of having a companion in the vehicle who understands us, but also then can predict our behavior. And that will only become more. And in a year or so, and then given the accelerated time frame we have with technology, it will be quite fascinating to see how we are behaving in the vehicle, speaking to our companion more than we probably speak to anyone else, and not having a phone call anymore.
I'm going to put aside the fact that sounds a little bit terrifying. So we're going to stop talking to humans on our telephone and start talking to our car. Not that I doubt the reality of that, just taking a moment to call that out. Let's talk about the one thing that OEMs really need to know. If we're saying, and again, maybe a chicken and egg, if we're saying we need lots more memory in order to handle these kinds of models, what does the revenue plan look like that's going to pay for that?
I'll let you answer that first.
Okay. I'm going to be provoking again. We have to make sure to understand, and I'm hammering on that, but it's so important. It is so important that we understand what do we value as connected services. And connected services is the baseline, is the foundation for having AI on top of it. Of course, at some point it will be ingrained with it, but what is it? Is the value of AI having that companion in the vehicle? If that is the case, is there a unique way? What you said is so right. We have to get away from comparing the phone on wheels with actually sitting in the car. That is not the case anymore. It was never the case. That is the sensory aspect, is the driving, it's the comfort, it's the safety aspect, and especially safety, driving comfort, and probably the fourth one is individualization or personalization. If you are able to provide value around those four, then you are able to monetize it. If you don't, you will not.
Excellent. Amber?
I like to think, and maybe this is my Amazon background, saying I like to look at the long-term flywheel of the customer and the purchases that I might be enabling downstream, because I've made the experience so easy to use, so interesting over time, and so sticky that I'm there when they have something that they need and it's a purchase. For me, that means that I think OEMs should be thinking more about voice authorized payment, voice authorization in general, and how that long-term relationship still brings value. And again, if you're talking about a front end that's a natural language understanding system, the easiest analogy is to look around to your personal relationships. Why do you keep coming back to certain people? They're offering you interesting growth opportunities for yourself. They might be great companions. They might be awesome mentors that help you crack big problems when you have something going on. So we can kind of access all of those similar features with these systems in the vehicle, but you got to make the conversation comfortable and easy, and the memory is going to be really important.
Can I pay Ford to transfer my agent from my F-150 today to my Mach-E tomorrow?
I wish. Yeah.
I don't know. What if that actually reduces overall vehicle sales because I don't want to give up my vehicle assistant?
I like to think of, I don't know if anybody remembers those little robot companion dogs in Japan.
Yep.
Yeah. And people pay still to get them refurbished to this day, and they were like 1990s products or something, right? There's entire specialists built around repairing because the relationship is so deep and the affinity is there. And I think people can have that with their vehicles.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we see that coming. What are, as we look out, and we'll have this be our last question, then we'll take some Q&A. As we look out into the world of partnerships, and particularly with big tech, where do you see the best combinations for future-looking innovation? Or at least an area of opportunity?
I'm thinking about this one quite a bit. Yeah.
What we've seen in the last, let's just say 10 years, there's been an increased level of partnership activity in the automotive industry, and that will only increase and it will get more and more. And the reason is that automotive companies have understood that they need partners to make what they are setting out to do possible. So from my point of view, that only gets more, and precisely and specifically what would it mean? It would mean that, like we've seen now with Mercedes-Benz and OpenAI, they are deploying ChatGPT in the vehicle. That is something where we see partnerships emerging more and more. And whilst we have more and more AI companies like OpenAI emerging, there will be a lot more partnerships in that area, so that some companies, they will have specific in-vehicle LLMs or GPTs specifically being developed for the vehicle, or even for that type of vehicle, around the specific use cases that clientele, that target audience driving that specific vehicle will have. So that will probably come more and more. This will be much more secluded. It will not be spread across all of them, but it will be a specific case where one OEM says, I want that specifically for my target audience.
Amber?
I think it's important for OEMs to not have to be the guest in their own home in their experience that they're developing. If you're experimenting with these technologies and making customer-facing features, you need access to your own data. You need to be able to parse it, distill it. You need to be able to train with it. You need to have continuous learning happening with these systems. And without access to dashboards and like real-time analysis, understanding what customers are saying in your own vehicle, you're not going to be able to adapt and customize these experiences in a way that make you actually, like, make your experience actually seem smart. So you can launch an intelligent feature and it's going to feel like the dumbest thing on the earth potentially if you don't have like end-to-end control over that data. I'm interested also in the relationships with big tech where they're breaking down their packages and opening them up and saying, okay, at the operating system level, you don't need this. That's fine. You can have more memory and compute because you don't need this package right now. Your customers aren't interested. You're not interested in surfacing features to them with it. We're going to take it out, and you can have some more mem and compute back and use it for other things that you think are important. That, to me, is a much more healthy relationship, and those conversations can be had. I also think there's a different appetite for OEMs in the US North America market for open source than we might see from Chinese OEMs. The lack of exploration around open source makes me kind of nervous. And I think there's a lot that could be done there.
Excellent foresight and insight for us. All right, I'm going to open the floor. Questions for, wow, front row, front and center.
Hi, you referenced the 2023 study that showed what half of the connected services that were available in the car were not used. Could you each give your own answer based on your organizations of why you think that was the case? what led to it? And I know you've been talking around these things, but like maybe talk about how you really think that's not going to be the case next year when they do another study, or 2 years from now when they're going to do another study.
I'm actually not familiar with the study that we referenced, but I do have thoughts on that. I think a lot of the times these services are hard to find. They're not packaged correctly in terms of the customer-facing user experience. So you have these really discrete features that have been launched because somebody decided that it could be monetized to a certain degree, and it was launched next to another thing that has some overlap with it. And from a customer experience, your customer is sitting there going like, oh, which one do I really think is You're just putting work on the customer to figure out how to make your experience a little bit more easy to use, as opposed to stuffing that all underneath your interface and surfacing the things that are really valuable. So I think some of this stuff is just really hard to find. I don't even know it's there for years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you, Amber. That is the main reason why most of the services are not being used, because nobody is explaining to that person that those services exist right from the start. Yeah? So you buy a vehicle in the dealership. The sales consultant doesn't even know that the connected services exist because he's not being incentivized on it. Yeah? So you know that. There is no incentive for a sales consultant to sell connectivity. Yeah? So that already has to be solved. And then the reason why they are not used, so take navigation. Yeah? Google Maps is free, is always up to date. With navigation in the vehicle, it has to be updated over the air. How many times is the navigation updated over the air? 3 times a year, 4 times a year, depending on which vehicle you have, of course. Yeah? But let's take the traditional OEMs. That is something where they have to always play catch up. So that's one example. The second one is in-vehicle entertainment, for example. So in-vehicle entertainment as something like that is probably new. We all had iPads for our kids in the back seats, but having in-vehicle entertainment for the passenger is totally new. So that already we see that, it's getting more traction, but that hasn't been really working well in the past, and the customer had to pay for it in addition. Yeah? So then sometimes even had to be another subscription for it. Yeah? So they had to subscribe to, let's just say, to US equivalent ESPN, for example, in the vehicle, even though they had an existing ESPN license at home. I hope that answers your question.
I also, this reminds me of an experience I had. I got a brand new 2024 vehicle recently, top of the line infotainment system, well awarded, and there was absolutely no noticeable difference when my connectivity package ended after the first year. No noticeable difference for months in my vehicle, until at some point I accidentally triggered the embedded assistant, and it was like, oh, I don't understand you because I can't reach the cloud. And then I tried to get an upsell, or it gave me an upsell to connectivity, which as a customer, the connectivity package and being slightly more conversational, those two things do not square, right? The price of the connectivity package and my assistant being able to talk to me a little bit better is not enough for me to pull the trigger on that.
Great question. Questions are the only thing standing between you and lunch, so we'll take them if you've got them.
My question is a US customer ready for AI in vehicle? That's the first question. And then the second question maybe coming off the back of that is it really feasible to tailor and train a specific data for a specific customer, and for the customer to have it moving from one vehicle to another vehicle?
On the feasibility, absolutely. That's a matter of when, not if. On the American customer, I think it depends on what segment you're talking about. There's customers right now that think that AI-driven features in their vehicle are essential to their next purchase. And then there's some that don't want it in their vehicle at all, which means your vehicles need to be equipped with those privacy and trust features we were talking about earlier, so they can say, no, I want the car, I just don't necessarily want that AI feature that's listening to me all the time. So yes, I think American consumers are ready for more AI in the vehicle, but it depends on the segment you're talking about and the type of vehicle you're talking about.
Agreed.
All right. All right, we are out of time, but I want to thank our panelists. Thank you to Amber and to Christian. I think it's been a phenomenally insightful and great hour we spent. Thank you all for being here, and let's give them a round of applause. All right, now I'm the chairperson again, and it is time for lunch. We'll be back here at 1:30. Thank you.